Okay, so hello again, aficionados. I am doing a redo of the video about perfect zone axis diffraction patterns. The reason I'm doing this is because it was pointed out to me by one of my users, Garrett, who is a very observant gentleman, that I was not properly gauging the intensity in the patterns. Okay, so there's a way to do this that, or I should say, there is a correct way to do this to make sure you don't harm the camera. Okay, and so we're going to go over this today. We're going to do this again today, and I'm going to show you how to safely take perfect zone axis diffraction patterns every single time. Let me go ahead and just re-embed this. Okay, so to start with, I'm going to pull up Velox here. I have to restart this. Where is it? No? Okay. I'll close all this and restart it. Sometimes this happens with a screen capture. Okay, so right now, this is just vacuum, okay? I'm just in vacuum. I have the beam spread out so it's beyond the area of the camera, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and start my live view here, okay? 1K and just, 200 milliseconds. So depending on your camera, like with this camera, we have the speed enhancement. So the shortest exposure time we can get here is 25 milliseconds with the full frame. Um, so the way to check this, right, if you type in 0 here, that will put it on your lowest time possible. And again, this is with the full frame. As you cut the area down, your minimum time is going to decrease more, okay? So like if we go to half of the readout area, you can see the minimum time got cut in half, okay? So anyways, we don't want to do that, obviously, but I just wanted to show you that really quick. Again, with the speed enhancement, this is we can go. This is as low as we can go, okay? So let me go ahead and take the screen out of the way. So here's what I wanted to show you here, okay? So the on the right here, you have the histogram, and you also have the object properties panel over here, okay? So the histogram is basically showing you the where the majority of your pixels are in terms of the intensity, okay? So you can see here, it's basically saying that the majority of the pixels are between 75 and 40 counts, okay? And now again, as we increase this, okay, so now you can see now as I increase the exposure time, my signal to noise gets better, right? And you can see here now my majority of my pixels are between 506 and 402, 403, okay? But this histogram is not telling you the full story in terms of the absolute maximum and minimum, okay? This is the majority of the pixels, okay? So in order to see your true max and minimum, you have to go to your property or your object properties and look under statistics here. So you can see here's the absolute minimum and absolute maximum, okay? This absolute maximum is the key number here, okay? So this is what you have to be careful of. You don't want this to exceed 8,000 approximately. 8,000 is the saturation point, and that's where you potentially risk hurting the camera, okay? So you can increase the exposure time safely until this number gets to 8,000, right? So if you increase this and you get to like 7, and sometimes too, depending on the situation, right, as we'll see when we go to diffraction, we can continue to increase this, and we may not see much of a change. At that point, we've hit saturation, and we know that, we don't need to go any further. But anyways, so you can see, though, this number is not the same as this, okay? So this is actually noticeably higher than this. Now, it's not a whole lot higher. That's only about I don't know, that's like a 5% increase. But it's still noticeably higher. With a diffraction pattern, though, this discrepancy is going to be huge. Okay, so let me go back and let me stop this here. Okay, so if we look at, I'm going to pull up a diffraction pattern here. Let's see, what are we going to open here? No. File open. Let me see here. Okay, here we go. Open these up here. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so these are not the examples I wanted to show. Let me close these. Close selected. Let's take a look. These are all still open here. What's going on? Yeah, see with these, this is what I was afraid of. See, with these okay, so anyway, I'll use these anyway here, okay? So you can see right here's your histogram here. Okay, so your histogram, right, is telling you that most of your pixels are between 0 and 50 counts, okay? If you look at the actual properties, you can see that the the situation is a lot different, right? So, right, in this case, I actually clipped the max range here a little bit, okay? This is what you want to avoid, but it's not showing up in the histogram, okay? That's the point though, right? Is this is a very high dynamic range situation, okay, where you've got a large difference between your maximum and your minimum in the picture. So in a high dynamic range application, the histogram is not going to be remotely close in terms of telling you the maximum counts. It may be closer in terms of the minimum, right? You can see, so this is telling us a negative value for some reason, but in terms of an absolute difference, that's only a 28 count difference, okay? In terms of the maximum difference, though, that's huge, right? You're talking about what, an 8,800 count difference, okay? So the point is, right, this is what you need to be looking at to make sure that you don't potentially harm the camera, okay? So close all these. Okay. And with that in mind, we are going to go through how to do this. We'll go through the trick again, and we will do this a little more safely. Okay. Okay, so I already aligned the C2 aperture. I aligned my monochromator already. So the other alignments that we need to do here are the pivot points. So the pivot points are critical because we need tilt purity for the trick to work, if you will. Okay, so, and again, tilt purity means that the beam doesn't shift when it's tilted. Okay, so we'll do pivot point X. Now again, if you move this off of the sample, it's a little easier to see. Now that's worse. There we go. Okay, that's good. All right, and then the last one is the rotation center. So when we do rotation centering, we're aligning the beam along the optic axis. We're going to deviate from this when we use the trick, but for starting, we want to have this, aligned fairly well here. Okay, so that's noticeably off. Okay, that looks reasonable right there. Okay, all right. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to dial in our condenser lenses to make sure that we're keeping the beam parallel. Okay, so if you go over to the beam tab and you find the beam settings panel wherever it is, you can see here if you have a 3 condenser lens system, you're going to have a range where it's parallel. Okay, so right about 500, yeah, is that where it goes from parallel to condensing. Okay, so again, as I spread this out here, right, and you can see, I think it's around 16 micrometers where it ends up. Okay, so it's more around 14. Okay, so basically between 500 nanometers and 14 micron diameter. So if we put and that's a little bit off, so I can do the condenser center alignment here one more time. Let me move this out of the way. So that's this guy right here. This is aligning C2 with C3. Okay, doesn't look that bad in that regard. Okay, that's worse. Okay, that's good enough. Now, if we do this, my experience with this is we usually have to redo the rotation center. So if we do this, no, that's not that bad. Okay, so we're still good. Okay. Anyways, I'm going to put this right in the middle in terms of the parallel range. So right in the middle there, that's like 6, 7 micrometers. Okay. So something about like, and we'll put it at 6. Okay. And we want to make sure. So something that's polycrystalline will work really well here. So this is E-beam platinum, and this is polycrystalline chromium. So those will work fine for this. And we'll go into diffraction mode. Okay, and diffraction alignment, this centers the pattern here. Okay, so now what we're looking at here, switch to high res mode, is the spot here. Okay, so this needs to be focused. Okay, if it's not focused, then we need to fine tune our condenser lens here, our lenses here. Okay, the other thing we want to check for is the symmetry of the spot. So this is pretty close to center. This is off or circular. This is off. We're going to click diffraction, right? So you can see, right, and we can make that a circle. So that was pretty close right there. Okay, but the way we do this here, right? Expand beam settings, and then the tune tab, and then multifunction Y, find focus back focal plane. Okay, and then you can watch what's happening, right? I'm adjusting C2 and C3 to get the spot focused. Okay, so I went too far. Okay, right about there. And now we're good to go. Okay, so now when we adjust the intensity knob, right, that spot should stay focused as we change the illuminated area. Okay, approximately. All right, so I'm going to turn off high resolution mode. Now, when you take your diffraction patterns, the higher you make the camera length, the safer it's going to be because you're going to spread the intensity out, or you're going to magnify the spots. Okay, so you're going to spread the intensity out in the spots over more pixels. The shorter you make this camera length, you're going to see a wider angular range, but you're putting all that current into fewer pixels, so it becomes a little bit more high risk to the camera. Okay, so 580. This should work perfectly fine for most single crystal work. Something in a few hundred millimeters. So I'm going to go ahead and just leave this as is. And I'm going to go ahead and turn diffraction off. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to find a grain to look at here. So, and now I did have some of these already stored up. But what I can do here to make this more interesting is we can do this kind of, live here. Where we don't know what we're going to look for. So here's a grain right here, okay? And let me just check and see if I didn't already do this one. Oops, where are we? Grain. Oh, I did this one already. So this was grain 6, I believe, but I didn't store the stage coordinates for it. So what are we looking for here? So I didn't save the reciprocal unit cell for grain 6. It's very odd. Let me open this up here. Okay. Yeah, this is, kind of interesting here, but I wanted to do one that was a little more higher symmetry. So what do we have here? All right, grain 1 looks like a good one here. So grain 1 is a fairly high symmetry zone axis. So where is grain 1? Here. Okay, so grain 1 is down here. So if we look at this, a lot of switching around here. Okay, this one's kind of dark right here. Well, you know what? I'm kind of just a little scatterbrained here. All right, let's try. This one's already kind of dark. Usually when you get closer to a zone axis, the grain's going to get darker. Let's just take a look at this one and see where we're at. Oh, okay. This one's already fairly close. Okay. So we can actually use this one if we wanted to. Okay. So you can see very clearly, right, that we're not quite aligned with the zone axis. Okay. So we're off by a little bit here. Okay. So on my zone axis tilt map, I know that I want to use negative alpha tilt. Okay. So you can see right there. Whoops. Okay. And so I'm just going to get this in the ballpark here because what I'm going to do to fine tune this is I'm going to use a trick. Okay. So, this is in grayscale right now. It's a little tough to see the intensity symmetry with grayscale because your eyes are only sensitive to about 25 shades of gray. But if we change this to temperature, it becomes much easier. Okay. Because your eyes are sensitive to I think technically thousands of colors, okay? So you can see here, it's very easy to see any asymmetry in the intensity. So this is pretty close, but it's probably still a little bit off, okay? So what I'm going to do here, let's switch back to grayscale, switch back to diffraction mode. Okay, and I'm going to spread out the beam so we're well into the parallel regime. And now obviously I want to isolate the grain, okay? So the way to do this is to use a selected area aperture, and that's important for a few reasons. So most notably, right, we need it to isolate the grain, but we also need it to cut down on the current, okay? Because right now, if we try to take a diffraction pattern with this much current, we're definitely going to have a problem. So if we find the apertures panel, which I need to go to over here, I can go to selected area. These are probably going to be too big and they're still going to have a lot of current. So we'll go to the 40 and we'll see how much current that's giving us. Okay. So you definitely want to be down here. Your screen current when you try to record diffraction pattern, especially if it's a single crystal. With a polycrystalline sample, you can get away with more because you're not focusing the intensity into spots but rings. But you definitely want to be at the very most here, a few tens of picoamps. So this is probably on the high end of what we would be maybe safe to use here. What would probably be better than this is to cut this down even further and to go to the 10. So if we go to the 10, because diameter scales with the square of the radius, right? We should see a reduction in the current by a factor of 16. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put that in, and yeah, that's basically what we see, right? So you can click adjust here, put this into the center. So now again, right here, I'm going to take this out here. So you want your area of interest, because you can't really see it at this point, right? Once you put the SA aperture in, you want that centered so you have a reference point, and then you can put your selected area aperture in and center that, okay? So then you know where it's coming from. Okay, so basically it goes back to the same point, and we're going to turn diffraction on. Okay, and I'm going to switch to thermal mode, temperature mode. And because we've cut the signal down so much here, this is going to be a little tougher to see, okay? But I can see very clearly that we don't have symmetry here in the pattern, okay? So what I can do now is the trick here is tilting the beam, okay? So I'm going to push dark field on my right-hand panel, and now my multifunction knobs are set up to tilt the beam, okay? So I'm going to tilt the beam until I see the symmetry in the pattern that I want to see. And because we have such little current here, I'm going to have to be kind of patient with this. Let me turn this off. Okay, so that looks reasonable. And again, when the current gets really low like this, it's going to be harder to tell, obviously. So, you have to take that with a grain of salt. Or not take it with a grain of salt, but keep that in mind, right? Okay, so that looks okay there. So, but now the problem here is our pattern isn't centered anymore, okay? So I'm gonna right click on here and put this on diffraction shift X and Y, okay? So now the question is, do we want to block off the direct beam or not? If the current is this low, we can probably safely keep the beam unblocked, okay? At least to start with. So let's go back to acquisition. we'll start this, and I'm going to put this down at the lowest value. So I'm going to just type in 0. Okay, and now I'm going to take my screen out. Okay, so now my max counts. Okay, I'm safely below where I would have a problem. Okay, right click on here, click crosshair, and now you can use your multifunctions to center the pattern. Okay, but you'll notice here, right, even with just 3 picoamps of current on the screen, I'm still getting a max counts here. That's still, this is about, I don't know, 10-15% of the dynamic range. Okay, but I can continue to safely increase the exposure time now. Okay, and I'm going to increase this until I get close to my threshold here. Okay, so I'm still below. So if I go one more click, so this should scale linearly here. If I double this, I'm probably going to start going over. Okay, so I'm still not over here. So let's see, if I go, let's go 500 milliseconds. Okay, so even now I'm still okay. Okay, but this is close enough here. So I'm going to leave this how it is. Okay, so obviously this is still very grainy, right? So what I can do here is I can do some frame combining. Okay, so if I wanted to say combine 20 frames, each one at 500 milliseconds. Okay, come here to your camera tab, click on one of your acquire windows here. Okay, we're going to increase the readout area here to 2K by 2K. So if we wanted to combine, say, 20 frames at half of or 500 milliseconds a frame, that would be, we'll put 20 in there, and we'd want to put this at, let's see, 20 times 0.5 should be 10, right? So that should be half a second a frame, okay? So that's what this is going to do, is it's going to add 20 frames, each one with 500 milliseconds of exposure, okay? So we'll go ahead and do this. Now, this is a CMOS camera. So with a CMOS camera, changing the binning doesn't do much in terms of the counts, because that's done off the chip. With the CCD, this is more pronounced. And actually with a CCD, using higher pixel resolution is actually very helpful when you do this, because you're spreading that signal out over more area, okay? All right, let me go ahead and blank the beam here. See, now this is actually giving me a little bit high of a reading here, but okay, so here we go. All right, so now it's still giving me a high number here, okay? So I'm gonna put this back down to 400 milliseconds. Let me unblank, oops. Okay, all right, so I'm gonna drop this down to 200. Let's try this again. Okay, now the most frames you can combine is, I think, 100. So if we did 0.2 times 100, right, that would be 20 seconds. So we can do 20 seconds and 100 frames. And again, that's the most frames you can combine, I believe. So let's try that and see if we get a little bit safer result here. I'm still set up for diffraction shift here. Now the other option, of course, too, if I'm having trouble with this, is I can block off the direct beam, and we can see how that looks. because presumably that's where we're getting most of the signal, but that's not always the case, especially with these, large grains or single crystals. When you're well aligned with the zone axis, the direct spot may not be the highest intensity feature in the DP. It could potentially be a bragg spot, especially when the sample gets thicker. Yeah, so this is still pretty high, even with the frame combining. So what's going on here? If I increase this, yeah, so for some reason, when I increase the binning, it's giving me a high number here. So let me drop this down. Okay, so that's a little better, but even still, that's still giving me a high number. If I go to 50 milliseconds, okay, so that's safer. Okay, all right, 75 milliseconds. So let's try this again here. Oops. Okay, so we'll go 0.075 times 100. All right, so that's 7.5. Now, we're probably 7.5 seconds. We'll round it to 8. That should be fine. Okay, and let's make sure here that we're not getting any clipping here. I'm not sure why changing the binning is doing that. Shouldn't be. Okay, so yes, so now we're not underneath, okay? So now this is obviously, not great looking. So what can we do here? Well, what we can do is, since we can't combine any more frames, we can do a series acquisition here, okay? The other thing we can do is we can try blocking the direct beam. The problem with that, of course, is then this is not going to be centered anymore. Depending on where the beam stop is, that's going to dictate where the pattern center is. But let's try instead, okay? We can go to series mode here. So exposure time is going to be 8 seconds. Frame combining 100 frames. Okay, and then the series size. So that's going to be 10 frames. So it's going to take a while to do. It's going to be close to a minute. The other option, of course, is since we weren't getting the clipping at 1K, we could drop this down to 1K resolution here. So if we drop this to 1K, and we also drop this to 1K, right, so this is still safely under here at 1K resolution. At 200, yeah, this is still okay. So let's try that instead. All right, we'll put this at 100. That's 200 milliseconds. Oops. So 100 times 0.2, that's 20 frames, okay? Or sorry, 20 seconds. So 100, 20 seconds. All right, and let's see what we get here. Okay, okay, and yeah, we're safe here. We didn't clip this at all, okay? All right, so now we're gonna have to do some digital fudging here to make this look better, okay? So we can increase our white level, that's the first thing. So if we drag this to the right here, right, and now I can just manually increase this. Okay, I have nice tight spots here. Okay, you You can play around with your gamma here as well. But yeah, we have a nice tight spots here. And now we're not causing a problem. Okay, so this is safe now. You can see we're well under the max. So yes, so with the Ceta camera, it's probably, again, with doing, selected area diffraction with parallel beam, you want to use the 1K setting here. Again, this is not like high resolution work, so 1K setting should be fine for this. We can play around with this a little more. Yeah, so we definitely. So the lower you make this, the easier it's going to be to see the kind of background stuff. So yeah, we'll put it about there. Was it? Yeah, 300 is good. Okay, and there we go. Okay, so, and then we didn't adjust the gamma too much. I mean, if we put that back, yeah, so we can't, you can see if you scroll in a little bit, you can see a little bit of that, but even still, that's not too bad. Okay, last thing we can try here. So if we want to put the beam stop in, okay, let's do the full insert. Okay, so that's blocking a little too much of the pattern. And it didn't change the max. Okay, didn't change the max. So again, when you're strongly aligned with the zone axis, that may not be the max feature in the picture anymore, or the pattern anymore. It may be one of these other spots, and that's exactly what it looks like is the case here. So yes, so whether, with the single crystals, again, if it's thicker, blocking the direct beam may not help you here. If you're doing this with polycrystalline samples, absolutely, I would block the direct beam off because they don't scatter as strongly, and you're going to have a very intense direct spot in that case because, again, you don't have as strong of the scattering. So the rings are going to be far less intense compared to what you're seeing in the direct spot. Same thing with an amorphous material. Amorphous material is going to be even more problematic. Okay, I definitely want to block the direct beam in that case. So anyways, let me go back here and take that out since it wasn't helping us at all. All right, so let me go ahead and stop this. So the moment you stop this, you're not putting this on the camera anymore. Okay, so this is safe. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put the screen back in. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to find my, or right click here, sorry, and click clear. And now this is still on the beam tilt for dark field. So I need to find my dark field panel, which is here. Click reset 0. That turns off the beam tilt. And then unclick dark field on your right-hand panel. And then if you click diffraction alignment here, that should move your direct spot back to approximately the middle, which it is. Okay. All right. So I'm going to turn off diffraction. I'm going to switch this to grayscale and take out my apertures panel, or selected area aperture. Okay. And there we go. So I don't believe I took this grain, so I'm going to have to rename this here. But anyways, let's do another grain here. Okay, so we can get some more sampling here. Okay, so let's see. Since I don't know where we're going, I'm just gonna, well, let me go ahead. Let me find my stage tab, and I'm just gonna add this. I'm not gonna name it, but and I'm not gonna cheat here. I have these other ones here, so let me look here at my picture. Okay, so I already did grain 5. Yeah, that's what this was. It was grain 5. Okay, so what do we got then? Need to, yeah. This thing does not like when you accidentally open EMD files. Okay, anyways, I'm going to reset alpha beta here. Give me a clean slate with the tilt. Okay, so and let's look at this guy right here. It's a nice big grain. There's another one right here. This one's kind of dark, so we may already be kind of close here. Maybe not. Not sure where the nearest zone axis is. I mean, it looks like we're kind of close to fourfold symmetry, maybe. So okay, well let's go for it here. So let's see. That looks like a minus beta tilt. I'm going to turn diffraction off here. Unfortunately, when you fudge with the beta, unless you have, a holder that is W centric, your stage is going to move when you do that. You'll notice also there's some bending contours in here, so these can be helpful to actually align to the zone axis. It's kind of hard to see them within individual grains like this, but with a nice perfect single crystal becomes very obvious. I mean, I'm not sure. This one may be fairly close here, actually. Yes, so this one's actually okay. This one's very close. So I'm actually going to go. This is actually a positive beta. This is actually fairly close to high symmetry zone axis. So I'm going to go ahead and do this one here. Okay, so yeah, I apologize for redoing the video. I don't want to give people incorrect information, information that may cause them a problem, or especially that may be injurious to the microscope equipment. So I want to be responsible in that regard. Again, thank you, Garrett, for pointing that out. That was just a complete lapse on my part. All right, so we're getting there. Okay, so that's minus alpha now. Okay, so that looks like a 111 zone axis. So when we get on the zone axis, we may see a nice confluence of bend contours, or we may not. I'm not entirely sure yet, but we'll see here. We should see the grain. Yeah, so I'm starting to see the grain kind of darken here, which is a good sign. Okay, so we're getting really close here. And again, we don't have to be perfect, right? Because we're going to use our beam tilt trick here when we get, close enough. Okay. So this is where, again, the trick is helpful because you don't have to kill yourself. All right, so this is close enough here, okay? This is close enough for us to use the trick from here, okay? So we'll go back to image mode, and I'm going to spread the beam out here. So we're well into the parallel regime. And now the other thing I can do too, because this is a 3 condenser system, right? As I make the beam smaller, while keeping it parallel, my current is going to get less, but I think the current density stays the same. So I don't think there's going to be much of a change here. Like we can actually test this. I'm going to put in the 40 and we'll see if we see any change in. Yeah, so actually, well, again, because I have it magged out more. So yeah, as I spread it out more, I actually get less here. So okay, I'm going to put it at. You can also, if you have a monochromator, you can spread the mono out a little bit. That can be a little tricky to do though, because sometimes that can affect the focus with the condenser lenses downstream. So I don't like to do that. You could bump the spot number up as well. The easier thing to do is just to try and use your selected area apertures here. So um, we'll bump this down to the 10. Okay, we can go ahead and center this since we know we're well inside of the grain. Okay, and I'm gonna go ahead here in Velox and I'm gonna call this grain 8 because I don't believe I have acquired from this grain yet. And into diffraction. Okay, so we can see very clearly we're not close to the zone axis. One thing you can do, if you're careful, you can move around with the stage. And because the sample is bent, we may be able to move it as well till it gets close to the zone axis. Um, Again, we want to stay within the grain, obviously. And so, you can't tell if you are now. You're going to have to kind of go based on, the appearance of the pattern. The nice thing about using the tilt trick, right, is if you have the tilt purity, that should be taken care of. So, well, now I'm a little paranoid. So here, let me go back here. You can adjust it. I mean, I wouldn't do it with the beta, but you could make an adjustment with the alpha tilt, a small one here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Yeah, so that's a minus alpha adjustment that I made. Okay, so that's really close, and I haven't even adjusted the beam tilt here. Okay, so let me go back to diffraction, or sorry, image mode here. I just want to make sure that I'm actually in the grain still. Yeah, so I'm basically, more or less in the center of the grain. Okay, we'll put it back in. Okay, fraction on. Okay, and we'll switch this to temperature. And let me change this to natural to give me a little bit faster response time than HDR. Okay, turn on dark field and let's see if we can't make this a little bit more symmetric. So the beam tilt X moves this way and the beam tilt Y moves this way, is what I've noticed. Oop, sorry, someone's calling me. I'll be right back. Yes, I'll be over in just a couple minutes here. Okay. All right, bye. All right, so there we go. So now again, right, when we're at 3 picoamps, okay, our signal to noise is not great here. So seeing the asymmetry is going to be a little tougher to do than if we had higher current. But, again, the goal here is right, safety, right? We're trying to be safe. Okay. That looks pretty good to me. So again, right click here, diffraction shift, and we'll go back to acquisition. And I'm going to put this down to my lowest exposure time. Take out my screen. Okay, and we're still safely under the max. So I'll use my shift knobs to center the pattern here. Okay, so already at just 50 milliseconds, yeah, in this case, I'm already getting close to saturation. If I go to 100, I'm gonna saturate. So what can we do here? So if we do, that's 50 milliseconds. So I can do, oops, 5 seconds and 100 frames. And that should be safe. And now if this doesn't look good, what we can do here and over a reasonable time is we can also do a series acquisition as well. Okay, so you can see, let me increase this. Okay, so that's not too bad. Still pretty good here. And if we increase the gamma, then we can again increase this more to maybe 200. Yeah, so that looks good. Okay, but what we can do here, the other thing that we can do, I should say, is we can do series acquisition, okay? So if this is, where are you? Okay, so we can do a series of these, right? So we're doing 5 seconds. Oh, let me go back. Yes, so whoops. Okay, so my max is safe, right? I'm under the 8,000 count limit. So go to series here, okay? And we want to do 5 seconds, 100 frames, and we'll do 10 frames, okay? So we're going to do, well, let's make it 12, so we round it out to an even minute, okay? 12 for the series, okay? So we're going to do basically 12 of what I just did, 12 of this, and then we're going to sum them together, okay? So, whoops, my bad. Made a little snafu there. If you click on it, it just stops it automatically. What I forgot to do was change this to 1K. All right, there we go. Now you can actually, you don't have to wait for this to collect all of the, right? We can actually sum these as it's going. You don't need to do this for optimized periodic images because you're not doing lattice resolution here. So we should be able to just do DCFI normally. And you can see by, yeah, by integrating the frames, we're already getting, a better looking result. I don't know why it does this, but when you do this, it puts the gamma to 1. So you have to put this, oh, sorry. Whoops, what's going on here? But this is the same as, okay, so we're basically, are we done here? Oh, we're doing 12, that's right. All right, let me stop this, blank the beam. Okay, so now this is 0 and 3. So we can type in, yeah, so I would always do that. If it's doing a negative counts, put this at 0. And then we can fudge the max here more here. So, all right, so that's maybe a little much. But you can see now we're getting like kind of more here in terms of the histogram. And that looks pretty good right there. So now this gamma, it's actually doing a gamma off of what this gamma was. So this was a gamma of 0.5. So if you adjust this to 0.5, it's fudging this back. So you should be able to leave this on whatever this was before, but you have to keep that in mind if you do a series acquisition. So, but that looks, yeah, that looks good here, okay? And again, right, nice and safe, right? We're under our max, so no issue here, okay? So again, this is safely recording the patterns. Now in this case, we probably would get a benefit by blocking the direct beam, because I think that is our most intense signal here. So if we come back to this, we'll do partial insert, and then we have to use diffraction shift to move it under the tip. Yeah, so you can see this went down considerably. So, okay, so I was able to increase this to, now if I go to 200, okay, so I'm still not clipping, so I'm still safe here. So, let's see. So if I do 20 seconds and let's see. Oh, math is hard. Okay, that's right. 20 divided by 100, right? Yeah, 20 divided by 100 should give me 200 milliseconds a frame. All right, so let's go ahead. I have it at 1K, and let's see how that looks. This is better if you can avoid doing the series, that's better, because the series takes up, you know, more memory on your hard drive when you do that. So this is just, you know, one image instead if you just do image with frame combining. But again, you can only 100 frames is the limit on the frame combining. You can't go more than that. Okay. Yep. So we're under our limit here. Let me stop, blank the beam. Okay, this is at 0, so we don't need to worry about that. Yeah, so that looks really good. This is, you know, again, if you block the direct beam off, now the only thing about this is this isn't centered anymore, right? So just aesthetically, it doesn't look quite as nice, but you know, you have to, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, so they say. Again, you can also bring this gamma up. That can help to smooth out some of the noise or the diffuse background. So I bumped it from 0.5 to 0.6. It defaults to 0.5 when it's in diffraction mode. But yeah, other than that, you know, it's good looking pattern here. So if we go ahead and save this. So now if we compare this to, it didn't save my settings here. All right, let me put this here. So at 150. Okay, you have to click save or it won't actually remember it. So, okay, that's with the beam stop. That's without the beam stop. So again, take it or leave it. Yeah, it's definitely, you know, it's easier to see the brag spots here because you don't have quite as high a dynamic range because you blocked off your direct beam. Okay. But anyway, we're nice and safe here. We're not getting anywhere close to clipping, right, the camera. Okay. So again, right, use 1K by 1K with your Ceta camera and monitor this maximum counts. Okay. As long as you're not eclipsing 8,000, right? Then I apologize. I don't know if I said 800 there. I might have said that a few times. But as long as you're not eclipsing 8,000 for whatever your exposure time is, that's what you can use. Okay. So whether you're combining frames, you're doing the series acquisition, you can manipulate that to get you some nice patterns. All right. So just really quickly here, unblank the beam, put my screen back in. I'm going to put everything back together here. Okay. Switch this to grayscale. Right click, clear. Dark field, reset. Turn dark field off. diffraction alignment back to center, take out beam stop. Apertures panel, take out. And there we go. Okay, so there is my updated version on how to safely take perfect zone axis diffraction patterns every time. Okay, all right, so again, if you have questions, comments, please leave them below, and thanks again for your support.